Hi, everybody. Lovely to meet you all. As mentioned, my name is Madelaine. I'm the team leader of Europe for Polyglot Group. So obviously working with a team, running a team of talent acquisition consultants. And in a previous life, I was 5 years with the government in Australia, working a lot in the energy sector, trying to attract investment into Australia. So across Asia and Europe, in the UK and the US, trying to bring these companies to Australia. So I've been seeing the trend in the past 6 or 7 years in terms of trying to find talent in this sector. So of course, thank you very much to Kathleen and the team for the opportunity to speak to you today. Essentially, I'm going to be talking about talent, and in particular, looking through the context of the market in Europe through the lens of the renewable energy sector, which really what you learn today is going to have an impact on the entire global job market in the next couple of decades. One thing that, on a quote that I always think about, last year, I don't know if you heard the UN Secretary General, he said last year that the era of global warming has ended and the era of global boiling has arrived. So quite dire warning, really. And as you know, that pretty much just means that we need to reduce our emissions drastically, and that means transitioning faster than ever to renewable energy sources. And so really businesses in the energy sector, but also most importantly in adjacent sectors such as transport, defense, infrastructure, construction, and the education sector is going to play a huge part in this as well, in training the talent, are going to play a huge role. So this is not just speaking to companies in the renewable energy sector, but everybody that is in an adjacent sector. So, you know, and the reason for this is because there are not enough renewable energy professionals. So employers already, and increasingly so, are going to look for transferable skills. So they're looking in the transport, infrastructure, construction, defense, tech sectors for electricians, technicians, engineers, data analysts, project managers, business development managers, but also, you know, how to support those teams with HR professionals and finance team and payroll. So it's actually going to have a huge impact on everyone, because, you know, they'll be needing those professionals, but also that support staff around them. So yeah, so today just wanting to share some information and some tips and advice of how you can prepare for that and be aware to impact some of your business plans for the future. So, so who is Anávo? You're probably thinking, but this is Polyglot Group speaking today. Why? Who is Anávo? What is she talking about? Well, I'll tell you what I'm talking about. And these are the 4 parts of the presentation today. So, of course, introducing what is Anávo and why we think we have something valuable to share with you. Secondly, I'm going to be speaking about the current state of the market in the sector and what are the broader forces that are driving demand for talents. And once again, why is this important for you to know if you are in transport, infrastructure, construction, you know, these adjacent sectors. Next, I'll be talking about the regional differences in the hiring markets through Western, Northern, Southern, and Eastern Europe, and how that's looking currently. And lastly, I'll finish with some tips for you as employers, but also have some tips for you, Anna, for your students, because we obviously speak to candidates and young professionals all the time. So I can share some with them as well. And then, of course, we will have time for some questions in case there are any questions. So who is Anávo? Well, Anávo is Polyglot Group. So we have a second company called Anávo Recruitment, which is a bespoke recruitment agency specialized in the renewable energy sector, sustainability and environment. And so we have presence over 4 different continents. The team in the Paris office speak over 10 languages. And so obviously running the team here covering Europe. We have our head office based in Sydney, covering Oceania and Southeast Asia. We have office in Cape Town, in California, and someone based in India as well, covering India and the Middle East. So really have a global team led by our global head of talent acquisition, who has 15 years experience in just renewable energy recruitment. So he's really seen it evolve over that time, based in both Europe, he was based in Germany for many years, and now in Sydney, covering Oceania. So quite a global perspective there. So as mentioned, I also lead the team at Polyglot. So in case you're not aware, Polyglot is a member of the chamber, offering HR and payroll outsourcing to international clients to help them grow and stabilize their business and manage their teams, as well as, of course, recruitment. So to give you a bit of a taste, some of our clients in the renewable energy sector, of course, can be as big as like the big OEMs, also project developers, asset management companies, and engineering, procurement, and construction firms as well. Great. So now I wanted to start with this graph. And this is produced by the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, just released a couple of months ago. It really shows, as you can see, the huge amount of growth in renewable energy installed power globally over the past 10 years. So as you can see, absolutely unprecedented growth in just last year, 86% of the total newly installed power capacity. So obviously it's an amazing positive trend. You're probably thinking, oh my God, that's amazing. We're doing so well. We're on track to meet our targets. This looks great. However, unfortunately, the reality is it's not enough. That is, I would think, the scariest part of this graph, because even this level of growth needs to increase quite substantially if we're going to meet binding targets. So the most important one to know for the EU is the 42.5% binding target by 2030 of a share of renewables in EU energy consumption across all sectors. So that's primarily transport, energy, and heating and cooling. So to give you a bit of perspective, we're currently at 23%. So to go from 23 to 42.5 in 6 years, needless to say, is quite a huge challenge. The other really important target to be aware of is what came out of discussions in the COP28 conference in December last year, where over 120 national governments and supranational blocs, such as the EU, committed to triple the world's installed renewable energy capacity by 2030. So, you know, the International Energy Agency released a report saying that under the current policy settings and market conditions, we're on track to increase it by 2.5 times by 2030. So we're still not going at a pace to reach that target of tripling. So to give you a bit of perspective, that's $12 trillion of investment that's needed in the next 6 years. And the world is currently on track to invest $6.6 trillion. So we need to almost double the amount, an extra $6 trillion. If we're going to meet that, and of course, these targets mean keeping global warming temperature rising to 1.5 degrees, which, as we know, is really important. So, of course, that's a huge amount of investment, but of course, that means a huge amount of jobs. So in 2021, IRENA released their outlook, and they said that in order to meet the goals, employment needed to increase from, it was 12 million globally employed in the sector in 2020, and it needs to reach 38 million people, jobs, by 2030. So in the next, so we're at 13.7 million people in the sector in 2022, and we need to get to 38 in 6 years. So of course, that's not just going to come from new graduates and people already in the sector. It's going to be taken from other sectors. There's going to be a lot of, employers are already doing it, looking for those with transferable skills, engineers in other sectors, to put on, 24 million jobs to be able to meet up with the demand and these project rollouts. So that all to say, the investment is enormous, the amount of jobs needed is enormous, and this is going to put such huge pressure on the hiring market globally. So I've distilled what I really want to say about this into 3 main points for you to think about. So the first one being that the emission reduction targets that I just mentioned and government incentives that come along with that are driving absolutely insatiable demand. And even though the jobs in the sector have doubled in the last 10 years, they've put on 1 million jobs from 2021 to 2022, it's still not enough. If that message is not clear enough. And the 2 legislations that have really kick-started this is that I think is worth mentioning are the EU's Renewable Energy Directive, which is the cornerstone 42.5% binding target across all of renewables in EU energy consumption by 2030, and the US's 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, which provided a much needed direction and investment, huge incentives for investment in the US in renewables and domestic manufacturing, which has really driven huge demand for the jobs as well. And of course, we can't talk about renewables without talking about China, because they are going at a pace outstripping everybody else. They have the strongest growth globally. For example, they commissioned as much solar in 2023 as the entire world combined in 2022. So they're really, and they're growing their wind 66% every year. So they're going at a huge pace as well. So to give you a bit of just a quick snapshot of where are the jobs in which sectors globally, sorry, it's a bit small, but China as well is leading the jobs in the wind. But as you can see, Germany, the UK, France are huge employers. Denmark, the Netherlands, Europe is extremely strong in wind in particular. For those who can't read, it's China, Germany, US, UK, Brazil, India, France, Spain, Netherlands, Denmark. And then the same thing for solar. Once again, China is above everybody else, followed by India, US, Brazil, Japan, Vietnam, Poland, Germany, Spain, and Australia. So why is this important for you to know as employers? Why am I telling you this? It's once again to reinforce the message that to keep up with this growth and deliver this growth, it's going to need so many different skill sets, with these millions more engineers, technicians, project managers, business development managers, and technical skills as the sector undergoes a lot of technological change as well. More tech skills, data analysts, etc. So employers are going to look from other industries, and as the market gets hotter and hotter, everybody is looking for the same people, same profiles, and this, of course, means salaries are going through the roof. So the second point that I think is important to mention is what has happened since the pandemic. So essentially, there are labor shortages in all industries in the EU, which you may already know. But, so the EU labour market, as well as, the entire OECD, saw increasing labour shortages in all industries. However, in particular, those in the energy-related or energy transition industries were quite impacted with a doubling of job vacancy rates from 2020 to 2023. So, there's a number of reasons for this. Of course, part of it is the enormous amount of growth. Can't keep up with there's not enough supply for the demand. But also, there has been a lot of growth even before the pandemic, particularly in the UK with, heat pump installations and transition away from gas. That's taken up a lot of electricians and installers and plumbers and things that are going to be needed more and more. But also thinking about, there are many, many structural factors which are causing issue, and number one being, an aging workforce. Many electricians are getting older and older. We only need more and more and more of them. And another factor is it being a really male-dominated industry. So, only 1/3 of the workforce are women. And this, of course, narrows the job pool significantly. And then the final reason for this, main reason, is, of course, the huge technological change happening, and the not enough upskilling being done by employers. So people, they're a great electrician, but they need to be retrained, or they need to have that new step and change, and maybe they're just retiring and not keeping on working. And of course, young graduates, there's not enough new talent coming through as well. And the third general trend, of course, is the above average salary increases. So this is compared to other industries or the market in general over the last 2 years. Of course, the salaries are coming from a much lower base compared from, say, the oil and gas industry or infrastructure, but we are seeing the gap narrow significantly between, renewables and these traditional industries. And, another point to add to this is just an observation that we see, our team sees often talking to candidates, particularly, young or in the middle of their career, is we're actually seeing more and more people moving into the sector, motivated not just by salaries, but also wanting a sense of purpose and meaning to their work, wanting to be part of a change, of a positive change to help the world, and, really thinking about, what am I doing, my work, I want to find meaning. And so more and more talent are moving into the sector, obviously not enough, but why is that important to know as an employer for any sector? I would say is that, you need to be thinking, how can I compete with that? How am I motivating my staff to stay and be passionate about my industry? How do I keep them excited and motivated? So I don't, if I employ a lot of engineers, in a couple of years, they might want to move into the renewable energy sector. But how can I keep them? If you're not in renewables, how can I motivate them and be passionate about my industry? So you have to be really thinking very proactively, knowing that this huge change in demand is going to sweep everybody up in it. So it's really important for employers across all sectors, I would say. So the third topic to touch on today is the regional differences. So as I'm sure you're all aware, there are differences in, the labour markets across Europe in terms of maybe skills or definitely salary, across the north-south divide in particular. But the main point I'd like you to take away from this slide is that we see this gap narrowing and in fact converging. And it's not as the north-south Europe divide is not as strongly pronounced in the sector as it is in others. So it's not that you're going to get significantly cheaper labor in Southern Europe, for example. So in a nutshell, this is kind of the state that we're in. So of course, Northern and Western Europe is the strongest and the tightest labor market. You know, it is the hardest to find talent. Of course, you know, in particular in Northern Europe, there is a lot of wind and offshore wind in the UK as well. And of course, these project costs are higher and therefore the salaries tend to be higher. For example, in the North Sea, there's a lot of activity going on, particularly in offshore wind. And of course, around that, it means there's also a lot of energy storage projects going on. There's always a lot of talk about grid updates and network connections.
Madeleine, you have got a nice representative of the north of Britain here with
yeah, so you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
It's true. So yeah, so there's a lot of highly skilled people and a lot of jobs needed in that region in particular, which is another reason why salaries are so high. In particular, the hotspots are definitely Germany, Belgium and the Netherlands, and in some sections of the UK. And of course, Germany, I would say probably the number one, because they're also, they were Europe's biggest solar market in 2022. So they're doing so many projects of many different types. It's so difficult to find talent. Speaking about the UK, of course, an interesting stat that just got released last month by the Office of National Statistics is that since 2015, there are 30% more jobs, an increase of 30% in the renewable energy sector in the UK. And in the same period, there was a decrease of 30% in the oil and gas in the UK, in the oil and gas industry. So that is also despite billions of dollars being spent by the oil and gas industry. So we're seeing that, you know, that it's not just, you know, it's also because of that aging workforce that I mentioned, people, electricians retiring out, for example, and more training needed. But, you know, the trend has already been going strong since 2015, and it's only going to accelerate. So if I'm talking about Southern Europe, of course, it's always sunny, meaning solar is the biggest employer. We're talking mainly about Spain, Italy, and Portugal. There are huge solar projects going on, and you know, as you would know, solar projects tend to be more mobile, more easily transportable. Therefore, they're cheaper, and therefore, historically, labor has been cheaper. However, because there are so many projects going on, and there are, you know, quite low unemployment, you know, in Southern Europe in this sector, it of course means that the labor market is getting tighter and tighter, and it's getting nearly as hard as Northern Europe to find people. And of course, coming with that means the salaries increasing. And of course, the biggest takeaway for you as employers is the tighter the labor market, the more that, you know, employers in this sector are looking to other sectors with those transferable skills to be able to meet their needs. And the last point here is about Eastern Europe. So really important not to forget what's happening in Eastern Europe. You know, Poland is the third largest solar market in the EU. So after Germany and Spain. So maybe not many people know, but it's a huge hive of activity, and there's some really great quality talent that are being trained and that are working with great skills. And what has contributed, of course, to this is, once again, the difficulty in finding people in Germany or in Western Europe, and so employers looking and moving to Eastern Europe. One example of that is one of our clients 2 years ago came to us asking for a senior engineer in solar to work on European projects based in Germany. We're able to find that person at the salary that they could afford, that they wanted. And now just a couple of months ago, same business, same role, wanting another senior solar engineer. And the salaries were so unaffordable in Germany that we looked and we looked, and we actually found a great candidate, but based in Poland. So that company is now, found a really good talent, but, to cover European projects based in Poland. So,
and if I may say, in Poland, you surely have a lot of electrician and plumbers anyway.
yes.
But my question here, how the war in Ukraine affects Eastern Europe in renewable energy?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated question, particularly as it continues, and it will have a spillover effect. Even just saw 2 days ago talking about Moldova, and is Moldova going to be affected by Russia? So it's tricky, but there's so much demand. Poland isn't Ukraine. I think they're going to be trying really, really hard because it's such a strong employer and there's such a pathway. The government is really invested to make it work and keep things working. And it's already been going on for years. It's been a slow drip, but now more and more, clients are realizing, it's maybe a salary that was in Germany 5-10 years ago, and the talent is really good quality. So it's not, you're not lowering your standards. So I think also it's going to be a really hard choice. People are so desperate to find people. A war, it depends how the war goes, I guess.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, so essentially, to summarize this slide, what it means is that, the high salaries is not isolated to one part of Europe. It's really, and then the north-south divide in terms of salary is narrowing at such a fast pace. It is converging. And so to keep that in mind. Great, so I'm going to finish off with some tips for employers, but also, a few for some young professionals based on, our experiences and the state of the market. So the first one is definitely the most important. By far, this is the only thing that you take away from today. It's this. So reward your staff and treat them well, because employees are being solicited on a weekly basis. My team's sending messages every single day. We go to trade shows. Talent is telling us, oh, I've been offered 3 jobs this week. It's crazy. They can be easily poached by new market entrants. So really can't take them for granted anymore. Need to pay a lot of attention to your engineers, to your data analysts, to your, I think for your whole team, but in particular with this on the horizon. So be generous. It's not just about salary, however, you need to make them feel supported. A huge part of that as well is training. We always say to candidates, young professionals in particular, when they're thinking about, oh, I've got, 10 job offers, which one do I take? They're all amazing salaries. We say, okay, which one is offering training? Which one is going to upskill you, has a program, has a professional development opportunities? And also, which one is offering a pathway, a career pathway? Which one has talked to me about and mentioned where I can go in the next 5 or 10 years? So it really is on you if you want to be competitive, if you want to retain your staff as well, to be thinking about upskilling your staff, because we are telling these are the small things that they have so much choice. These are the only things that will make you stand out and keep you attract talent and keep it. And this is what we're recommending, as a differentiating factor for young talent in particular. So yeah, of course, otherwise you risk losing them and an extremely uphill battle in replacing them harder than ever before, and it's only going to get harder. The next point is, of course, working with local experts. And, you know, of course, if you're working with someone with knowledge with the local hiring market, such as Anávo, for example, you're going to know straight away, what does a competitive salary look like? What is the experience that is actually realistic? Maybe employers had it better 5, 10 years ago, where they could say, oh, I want someone at 50K with 10 years experience. Maybe that you're not going to be able to afford that anymore. So what is the market standard, and what is a realistic ask? Where should you be looking? Should you be looking in the region? Should you be looking in Eastern Europe realistically for your budget and your needs? And of course, it can also be drawing on the extensive database and help you navigate local employment laws as well very easily. And if this presentation hasn't shown enough, speed, you need to be fast. You need to be super quick. And, if you have that help on your side, it doesn't mean you're learning on the go and losing these candidates because you're not competitive from day one. So that's something to think about as well. The other point, the next point that is worth mentioning, is to consider talent from outside Europe. So, as I've said, sector is booming in Europe, but also globally. And China, the US, and even Australia, are a huge growing sectors with great talent. So to meet your needs, if you're struggling with European citizens, look outside of Europe to find really experienced and great quality candidates. And of course, if you work with a local expert, it can help, smooth the process if you're worried about, visas and hiring practices and the local employment expat laws and things, to really simplify that so it's not daunting. And then the last point, of course, is get in early. This industry, from our experience, is moving so fast. It's really rapidly evolving. There's so much opportunity. So if you are an adjacent sector as well, look at how you can expand your business into the energy transition. It's not just about building wind farms and solar. It's about retrofitting buildings, how to make them more, reduce their emissions output, smart cities, circular economy, all of these are part of the energy transition and play a role. So there is space, and also there's demand, there's need for it. So it's not an overcrowded industry. There's so much to be part of, and trillions of dollars of investment going into it. So plenty of opportunities, but also, getting in early is also about solidifying your brand reputation. There's going to be so much demand. Well, there is already. You need to really focus on growing your reputation and your brand trust. Think about your marketing. This battle is going to spill over into all sectors. And so you need to be ready. You need to be competitive. You want to be an attractive employer if you want to attract, but also retain your talent. So everybody needs to start thinking about, are we attractive to candidates, and how can we improve that? In terms of in the education sector, the main things we tell young talent is industry experience. So internships are highly valued by employers. They want that on the ground experience. Also, the grande école, like the really prestigious universities, are not as important in this sector. So in some sectors, they're all employers look for, but we don't recommend our candidates, and our employers are not as interested in a name of a prestigious university. They want to see technical skills. They want to see the internship experiences. So that don't be worried about that for students who can't afford or don't get into a prestigious university. It's not an issue. And of course, build a network. So a lot of the recruitment goes on in this sector by people knowing other people or recommending, and you really need to be, there's so many young talent fairs or networking events or expos and trade shows where you can put yourself in front of potential employers and make yourself known, and they're more likely to hire you. So that's some little tips for young talent. So that is the presentation for today. So of course, main message, we're on the precipice of absolutely transformational change. It's going to spill over and reverberate around the world, in so many different sectors. So I really encourage you to plan for this and to embrace it and be part of it. And of course, if you'd like to know more or have any questions, you can reach out or visit our website. Happy to discuss further.
But maybe